The rhythmic drumming of rain against my East Vancouver apartment window had become my meditation, a constant in my life for 12 years. It was a sound that demanded nothing, offered no criticism, and expected no reward. Seated at my small desk, tucked into the corner of my modest one-bedroom, the glow of my laptop screen reflected in my reading glasses. It was a Friday afternoon, and I had 3 tax returns to complete before the weekend. Elaine Porter, the hard-working woman from the ground floor laundromat, the Patels, the kind-hearted owners of the neighborhood convenience store, and young Caleb Morgan, the determined Uber driver putting himself through UBC. Small clients, simple work, honest living. My fingers moved across the keyboard with the same precision they once held when handling billion-dollar portfolios. Muscle memory, it seemed, was the last to surrender. The apartment was quiet, save for the rain and the occasional groan of the ancient radiator. I had learned to appreciate silence over the years. It felt genuine, or at least didn't pretend to be something it wasn't. Suddenly, my phone vibrated on the desk, an unfamiliar number from Toronto. I hesitated, already overwhelmed by spam calls, but an inexplicable impulse made me reach for it. "Is this Andrew Blake?" The voice was female, professional clipped. "Speaking, Mr. Blake. This is Patricia Holbrook from Ashford and Associates. I'm calling regarding the estate of Helen Blake." My hand froze above the keyboard. Helen. Margaret. I hadn't spoken that name in years, hadn't even allowed myself to think about it. "I see," I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. "I regret to inform you that Mrs. Brennan passed away on Tuesday. The funeral is scheduled for tomorrow at 2 p.m. at Mount Pleasant Cemetery in Toronto. Following the service, the will shall be read at our offices at 4 p.m. Your presence is requested." The words echoed in my mind. Margaret was dead. The woman I loved more than anything. The woman for whom I sacrificed my career. The woman who had never spoken to me again. "Mr. Blake, are you still there?" "Yes, I'm here. Will you be able to attend?" Every fiber of my being screamed at me to refuse. What right did I have to be at Margaret's funeral? I was the disgraced ex-husband, the convicted felon, the man who stole from his own company. I could still see the headlines from that time. CFO Andrew Blake charged with embezzlement. They always used the worst photo, the one that made me look guilty, even though I wasn't. But a stubborn voice, a remnant of the man I once was, whispered that I had to go, that I owed Margaret at least that. "I'll be there," I said, the words feeling alien in my mouth. After hanging up, I sat motionless, watching the rain race down the window in chaotic streams. Toronto. 12 years since I'd been back. Almost as long since I'd seen Sophie Carter, my daughter. Our last meeting was in a courtroom, her face pale and ashamed as the judge read my sentence. She was 28 then, just starting to build her career in tech. Now she would be 40, a stranger. I closed my laptop and walked to the small closet where I kept my only presentable suit, navy blue, a bit dated, but well-maintained. I had worn it to countless job interviews that led nowhere, to meetings with parole officers, and finally, to the small accounting firm where I found work preparing taxes for people who paid in cash and didn't ask questions about my past. I held it up, checking for moths or stains. It would have to do. Sleep evaded me that night. My thoughts were filled with my last encounter with Margaret. It was in her hospital room, 3 months after my sentencing. She was recovering from a stress-induced heart attack that had nearly killed her. Sophie Carter stood guard, like a sentinel. "You need to leave," Sophie had said, her voice cold and hard. "You've done enough damage." Margaret had looked away, refusing to meet my eyes. That silence was more painful than any words. I left. I got on a bus to Vancouver, as far from Toronto as I could get and still be in Canada. I started over with nothing. No reputation, no contacts, no references. Just a 60-year-old man with a criminal record trying to learn how to be human again. The next morning, I boarded the early flight to Toronto. 6 hours spent staring at clouds, trying not to think, The woman in the next seat tried to make small talk, asking about visiting grandchildren, but I must have seemed unapproachable because she eventually gave up. Toronto had changed, bigger, brighter, more skyscrapers piercing the sky. The taxi driver who picked me up at Pearson talked about the Raptors and the housing market. I nodded politely but stayed lost in my own thoughts. I had booked a room at a small hotel near the cemetery. Nothing fancy, just a place to change and pull myself together before the funeral. At 1:30 p.m., I put on my navy suit, straightened my tie with hands that trembled only slightly, and hailed another cab to Mount Pleasant Cemetery. The rain had followed me from Vancouver, a light mist that made everything seem gray and blurry. There were more cars than I expected. Margaret had built Brennan Technologies from a small startup into one of Canada's biggest tech companies. Of course, there would be a crowd: board members, employees, business associates, maybe even some politicians. I stayed on the edge, hidden behind a large oak tree, watching from a distance. I could see the group gathered under a green canopy. Sophie Carter stood in the front, her hair shorter than I remembered, wearing a black dress and heels that emphasized her CEO status. Two men in expensive suits, probably company executives, stood beside her. The service was short. A minister spoke about legacy and contribution. Someone from the company talked about Margaret's vision and leadership. Sophie stood perfectly still, her face composed, professional. My daughter had mastered the art of wearing masks. I didn't approach, didn't let myself be seen. As the service ended and people started heading back to their cars, I walked in the other direction, my hands in my pockets, my collar turned up against the mist. The law offices of Ashford and Associates were on the top 3 floors of a glass tower in the financial district. I arrived early, a habit from my old life, and waited in the lobby watching well-dressed people rush by with briefcases and phones glued to their ears. At 3:50 p.m., I took the elevator to the 28th floor. The receptionist looked up as I approached. "Name, please." "Thomas Brennan." Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, maybe even disgust. She quickly recovered. "Conference room C. Down the hall. 3rd door on the right." The conference room was all glass and chrome, with a panoramic view of downtown Toronto and the lake. A long mahogany table dominated the room, surrounded by leather chairs. Several people were already seated, faces I vaguely recognized from Margaret's professional life. They stopped talking when I walked in. I chose a seat near the door, away from the main group. The chair felt uncomfortable, or maybe that was just me. I clasped my hands on the table and waited. Sophie Carter arrived at exactly 4 p.m. She walked with the same purposeful stride that Margaret used to have. All business, all control. She went straight to the head of the table, the seat that probably belonged to her mother at board meetings, and sat down without acknowledging anyone. Then she saw me. For a split second, her composure cracked, her eyes widened, and her face paled. Then the mask went back on, even stronger than before. "What are you doing here?" Her voice cut through the room like a knife. "I was invited," I said quietly, "by Mrs. Holbrook. This is family business. You gave up that right when you stole from Mom's company." Some people shifted uncomfortably. I kept my hands steady on the table, my voice calm. "I'm here because I was asked to be here." Sophie's jaw tightened, but before she could say anything, the door opened, and Patricia Holbrook walked in. She was younger than I expected, maybe in her mid-40s, with streaks of gray in her hair pulled back in a bun and glasses perched on her nose. She carried a leather portfolio and moved with a quiet confidence. "Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm Patricia Holbrook, senior partner at Ashford and Associates, and I had the honor of being Mrs. Brennan's estate attorney for the past 15 years. She sat down at the table, positioning herself between Sophie and me. "I know this is a difficult time, so I'll try to be as efficient as possible." She opened her portfolio and took out a thick document, bound in dark blue. The last will and testament of Margaret Elizabeth Brennan, executed on March 15th, 2024. Sophie leaned back in her chair, looking satisfied and entitled. I knew that look. It was the same expression she had when she won her first case as a corporate lawyer before moving into management. Pride mixed with an unwavering belief that the world would bend to her will. Before we get to the specific bequests, Mrs. Holbrook continued, I want to read Mrs. Brennan's opening statement. She was very clear that this had to be read aloud in its entirety before anything else. She adjusted her glasses and began to read in a clear, professional voice. To those gathered here, if you are hearing this, then I am gone, and it is time for certain truths to be revealed. I have lived my life, burdened by numerous regrets, but perhaps none greater than my silence. I built a company, created jobs, generated wealth. These things seemed important at the time, but I also destroyed a good man's life to protect my business, and I let my daughter grow up believing lies because the truth was inconvenient. This will is my attempt, however inadequate, to finally set the record straight. The room went silent. Sophie's expression changed from confident to confused. Mrs. Holbrook continued reading. Andrew Blake did not embezzle funds from Brennan Technologies. I know this because I was the one who did it. The words hung in the air like smoke. Someone gasped. Sophie's face drained of color. In 2012, Mrs. Holbrook read, our company was on the verge of collapse. We had overextended ourselves on 3 major projects, and our cash flow was critical. I made the decision to divert funds from our pension accounts. Temporarily, I told myself, to keep us afloat. It was illegal. It was morally wrong. And I was solely responsible. Thomas found out during a routine audit. He confronted me, threatened to report me to the authorities. I begged him not to, not for my sake, but for Sophie's. She had just joined the company. Any scandal would ruin her career before it even started. Thomas loved his daughter more than anything, so he made me an offer. He would take the blame for the missing funds. He would claim that he had been embezzling for personal gain. In exchange, I would guarantee Sophie's future at the company, groom her to eventually take over, protect her from the consequences. I agreed. I let him sacrifice himself, his reputation, his entire life. I justified it by saying it was for Sophie, for the company, for the hundreds of employees who depended on us. But really, it was an act of cowardice. Thomas went to prison for crimes I committed. He lost his license, his career, his family, and I stayed silent. I built my empire on his silence. Mrs. Holbrook paused and took a sip of water from a glass on the table. Sophie sat motionless, her hands gripping the edge of the table so tightly that her knuckles were white. The others in the room weren't looking at me anymore. They were all staring at her. I'm not looking for forgiveness. Mrs. Holbrook continued reading. That's not possible for what I've done, but the truth needs to be told. Andrew Blake is innocent of the charges against him. He is innocent of everything except loving his daughter too much. This will is my confession and my atonement. Mrs. Holbrook put down the first page and picked up the next one. Now for the specific bequests. To my executive team at Brennan Technologies, Evan Porter, Susan Martinez, and Robert Liu, I leave a collective bonus of $5 million to be divided equally, in recognition of your years of service and unwavering loyalty. She went down the list, giving generous gifts to charities, creating scholarship funds in Margaret's parents' names, and awarding the company penthouse to Evan Porter, who had apparently been Margaret's right-hand man for years. Finally, to my daughter, Sophie Carter Elizabeth Brennan. Sophie straightened up a little, her eyes fixed on Mrs. Holbrook. Sophie Carter, you are both my greatest achievement and my greatest failure. I gave you every opportunity, every advantage, every chance to succeed. But I also taught you to believe that success is more important than integrity and that appearances matter more than truth. I hope that someday you can forgive me for this. I leave you the sum of $25,000, $1,000 for each year you have worked at Brennan Technologies. Along with this message, money you have not earned corrupts. Leadership you have not learned destroys. Start over, as your father once did, and maybe you will become the person you were meant to be. The silence that followed was heavy. Sophie's face had changed, going from white to almost gray. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The remainder of my estate, Mrs. Holbrook read, her voice steady and clear. including all shares of Brennan Technologies, all properties, all investment accounts, all intellectual property rights, and all other assets, totaling approximately $185 million. I leave to my former husband, Thomas Brennan, the only truly honest man I have ever known. The room erupted, not loudly. We were Canadians after all, and even shock was expressed with restraint, but erupted nonetheless with murmurs, exclamations, and the scraping of chairs as people turned to look at me. I stayed still, my hands clasped on the table, and felt nothing. Or maybe I felt so many things that they all added up to numbness. "There's more," Mrs. Holbrook announced, raising her voice slightly. The room quieted again. Mrs. Brennan left specific instructions. "Mr. Brennan, this is addressed directly to you." She pulled a smaller envelope from her portfolio, cream-colored and sealed with wax. She slid it across the table to me. My name was written on the front in Margaret's unmistakable handwriting, precise and bold. "She asked that you read this in private," Mrs. Holbrook said, "but the rest concerns estate management, which I should explain now." She started talking about trusts, tax implications, and transfer procedures, but I wasn't listening. My eyes were glued to the envelope, to Margaret's handwriting, to the faint echo of her hand moving across the paper. When had she written this? How long had she held these words inside, waiting for the right moment to say them? Sophie stood up suddenly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is ridiculous. She wasn't in her right mind. I'm going to contest this. Mrs. Brennan underwent thorough evaluations by 3 independent physicians in the months before her death," Mrs. Holbrook interrupted calmly. "They all certified that she was of sound mind and body when she signed this will. She anticipated potential challenges and took the necessary precautions. The will is legally unassailable." "He stole from us." Sophie's voice rose, losing its professional composure. She pointed at me, her hand shaking. "He admitted it. He went to prison. He took a plea deal." "If he took a plea deal to protect you," Mrs. Holbrook said softly, "as your mother has just explained." "No." Sophie shook her head, her hair coming loose from its neat bun. "No, that's not. He wouldn't." She looked at me then, really looked at me for the first time since I'd walked into the room. I saw her taking in my outdated suit, my worn shoes, my lined face, my gray hair. Saw her trying to reconcile this image with whatever story she had created in her mind over the years. The criminal father, the betrayer, the selfish man who ruined everything for money. "Did you?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Did you really take the fall for her?" And oh, I met her gaze, Margaret's eyes, the same deep brown, and nodded once. "But why would you do that?" "Because you were my daughter," I said simply. "And I loved you." The past tense hung between us like an accusation. Asterisk, had times loved. The girl I pushed on swings, helped with homework, taught to ride a bike. But that girl was gone. This woman standing in front of me, shaking with anger and confusion, was a stranger. Sophie's face crumpled. For a moment, I saw the girl she used to be. Insecure, vulnerable, scared. Then she turned and ran out of the conference room, her heels clicking loudly on the marble floor. The door closed softly behind her. The other executives started gathering their things, muttering excuses and condolences. Within minutes, the room was empty, except for Mrs. Holbrook and me. "That was more dramatic than most will readings," she said, allowing herself a small smile. "Though maybe not more dramatic than Mrs. Brennan intended. She always had a flair for timing." "She always did," I agreed. Mrs. Holbrook started packing up her papers. "I'll need you to come by the office next week to sign some documents. There's a lot of paperwork involved in transferring this much wealth." "I'm sure there is." She paused, studying me carefully. "You don't seem surprised or happy. Most people in your situation would be celebrating." "Most people in my situation wouldn't be in this situation," I said. She smiled again, this time more genuinely. "Mrs. Brennan said you'd react this way. She said you'd probably want to give most of it away. She knew me well. She loved you, you know, even after everything. Maybe times, especially times after everything." Mrs. Holbrook snapped her portfolio shut. I'll let you read her letter in private. Take your time. The room is reserved for another hour. And after she left, I sat alone in the glass and chrome room, watching the sun set over Toronto, the city I used to call home, the city where I had a career, a family, a life. All gone now, scattered like ashes in the wind. I picked up the envelope, feeling its weight in my hands. Part of me didn't want to open it, didn't want to hear Margaret's voice again, even in words, didn't want to feel anything at all. But I broke the seal anyway. The letter was written in the same precise handwriting as the envelope, dated 3 months before her death. Dear Thomas, if you're reading this, then I'm finally free of the cowardice that defined my life. I wish I could say this brings me comfort, but the dead have no comfort, only silence. This letter isn't an apology. Words can't undo what I did to you. Consider it instead a confession, a testimony, a final reckoning. I want you to know that I found out I was dying 14 months ago. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctors gave me 6 months. I've stretched it to 14 through sheer stubbornness and the best medical care money can buy. But even money has its limits, and I've reached mine. When I got the diagnosis, my first thought was relief. Not for myself. Dying is terrifying, Thomas, no matter how long you've lived, but relief that I finally had an excuse to tell the truth. What was the company compared to death? What was reputation compared to facing whatever comes next with a clean conscience? But even then, I hesitated. I told myself I needed to arrange things properly, needed to make sure Sophie was taken care of, needed to plan the company's future. Lies. All of them. The truth is, I was still a coward, even facing death. It was Sophie who finally pushed me to act. 3 months ago, she came to me with plans to expand the company into AI development. She was so excited, so proud. She showed me her business plan, her projections, her strategy. It was brilliant work. She's always been brilliant, but there was something missing, a sense of ethics that should have been there. What if the technology gets misused? I asked her. What if it hurts people? That's not our problem, she said. We're not responsible for how people use our products. And I realized I'd taught her that. I'd taught her that success justifies any cost, that business is amoral, that you do what you have to do to win. I taught her those things by example, by staying silent about what I'd done, by letting you take the blame. I turned you into her cautionary tale, the weak man who stole because he wasn't strong enough to succeed honestly. And she learned the lesson I intended. Be strong. Be ruthless. Never let sentiment get in the way of winning. I created a monster, Thomas. Not Sophie. She's still capable of being the person she should have been. But the version of her I shaped, molded, trained to follow in my footsteps. Asterisk that times version is a monster, and it's my fault. So this will isn't generosity. It's penance. It's strategy. It's my last attempt to be the mother Sophie deserved, even if she'll hate me for it. The money I'm leaving you, I know you don't want it. I know you'll probably give most of it away. That's fine. That's expected. But I'm also leaving you Brennan Technologies, and that's where I'm asking something of you. Don't let the company die. Don't sell it off in pieces or shut it down. It employs 3,000 people. It provides health care, pensions, opportunities. Those people are innocent of my crimes and yours. They deserve better than to be casualties of our war with ourselves. But also, don't let Sophie have it. Not yet, not until she's earned it, not until she understands what leadership truly means. Run it if you can. Hire someone to run it if you can't. Structure it however you need to. But please, Thomas, make it something worth inheriting. Make it a place where integrity matters, where people matter, where success is measured by more than profit margins. Make it what it should have been from the beginning. If Sophie ever becomes she believed in, the person I should have molded her into, and then, and only then, bequeath it to her. That's the sole condition I place upon you. I've also enclosed comprehensive documentation detailing my transgressions, originals of bank statements, emails, memos, irrefutable evidence of my actions. If it suits you, deliver it to the authorities. Officially clear your name. You've more than earned that absolution. Alternatively, you may choose to keep it private, allowing the truth to surface within the will's contents. That decision rests entirely with you. I remain uncertain about the existence of an afterlife, Thomas. I cannot foresee whether I will face judgment for my deeds. Yet, if such a judgment awaits, I pray that the arbiter acknowledges the profound love I held for our daughter. My affection ran so deep that I willingly tarnished the reputation of a good man to shield her. That love was self-serving, rooted in cowardice, and inflicted irreparable wounds. Nonetheless, it was undeniably love. I offer my sincerest apologies. I recognize the inadequacy of these words. Sorry cannot rewind the clock by 12 years. Sorry falls short of restoring your tarnished reputation. Sorry is incapable of reconstructing your relationship with Sophie Carter. Sorry is merely a paltry word, the only offering I can extend, alongside funds you deem unacceptable and a firm you never coveted. I implore you to wield them with greater wisdom than I ever did. Margaret, having meticulously read the letter not once, but 3 times, I carefully refolded it and returned it to its envelope. My hands maintained an unwavering steadiness, and my eyes remained remarkably dry. An unsettling sense of tranquility washed over me, akin to the feeling one experiences upon completing a protracted voyage, only to discover a profound emptiness at its end. Margaret had passed. The truth was now laid bare. Sophie Carter was now aware of my actions and her mother's machinations, and I was in a twist of fate that bordered on the absurd, impossibly wealthy. The sheer surreality of it all left me reeling. Rising from my seat, I retrieved the envelope and approached the window. The sun had long since retreated below the horizon, and the cityscape of Toronto glittered with lights resembling a constellation scattered across the earth. Somewhere amidst that sprawling metropolis resided the young girl I once playfully pushed on swings, the very daughter for whom I endured imprisonment, the enigmatic stranger who had departed from this very room. A mere hour ago, her world irrevocably shattered. I should have felt vindicated, justified, or perhaps anything, other than this overwhelming, desolate weariness. Yet all that consumed me was an all-encompassing exhaustion. The ensuing week unfolded in a relentless blur of documents, legal consultations, and meetings with accountants. Mrs. Holbrook, with remarkable efficiency, granted me access within 5 days to accounts overflowing with more capital than I could conceivably expend in 10 lifetimes. Within that same week, I had successfully acquired a majority stake in Brennan Technologies and scheduled a board meeting to formally introduce myself as the company's new owner. Sophie Carter and I remained steadfastly out of contact. We orbited each other like binary stars, drawn together by a shared history too profound for collision, yet bound together by forces too intricate to permit a clean break. On Thursday, I convened with Brennan Technologies' executive leadership team. They were unfailingly polite, impeccably professional, and palpably intimidated. The disgraced former CFO had inexplicably ascended to become their superior. The man once accused of embezzling from the company now held its reins. Despite Margaret's will unequivocally exonerating me, people invariably clung to their preconceived notions, clinging to the narrative of 12 years past. I am not here to micromanage this company, I declared to them in what was once Margaret's sanctum of a conference room. I lack both the requisite skills and the inclination. My singular objective is to ensure its ethical operation. Mrs. Holbrook will implement rigorous oversight measures, quarterly independent audits, comprehensive ethics training for all executives, and a robust whistleblower protection system that reports directly to the board, which I will chair. David Chen, Margaret's former second-in-command, cleared his throat, a gesture that spoke volumes. What about the daily operations? Who will assume the role of CEO? You will, I stated firmly. As interim CEO, pending formal approval from the board, you've been effectively performing the role for the past 5 years. Let's simply formalize it. A fleeting expression of relief momentarily illuminated his face. Sophie Carter has been quite vocal about contesting the will and seeking to garner board support against your ownership. I responded with a smile that lacked any semblance of sincerity. Let her try. The will is airtight, and Sophie Carter would be well advised to learn a lesson her mother never imparted. Some battles are simply not worth fighting. Following the meeting's adjournment, I embarked on a tour of the building my building now, though the reality of that statement seemed to hold little weight. Employees engaged in hushed whispers as I traversed the corridors, some driven by curiosity, others by resentment, but few displaying genuine enthusiasm at my presence. I ultimately found myself on the top floor, within the confines of Margaret's former office, now stripped bare of personal effects, cherished photographs, and any discernible trace of her existence, save for the faint, lingering scent of her perfume clinging to the curtains. The office's floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking panorama of the city sprawling beneath. I stood where Margaret had likely stood countless times, gazing upon her kingdom. Had she ever experienced regret for her actions, or had she successfully convinced herself that they were justified, a necessary price for achieving unparalleled success? My phone buzzed, interrupting my reverie. A text message from an unknown number. "Can we talk? S." I stared at the message. Two simple words, accompanied by a single initial. My daughter reaching out after 12 years of radio silence, requesting something she had never needed before my time, my undivided attention, and my willingness to listen without judgment. I could easily ignore it, allowing her to stew in confusion and mounting anger, forcing her to experience a fraction of the pain I had endured while languishing in prison, knowing that my own daughter believed me to be a common criminal. But revenge had never been my preferred course of action. Besides, I was weary of harboring anger, weary of carrying any burdens at all. I responded without hesitation. "Saturday, 10 a.m. Van Hoot on Queen Street." Her immediate reply, "I'll be there." Saturday dawned cold and bright, one of those quintessential autumn days characterized by abundant sunshine yet lacking any genuine warmth. I arrived early, ordered a black coffee, and settled into a window seat. The cafe bustled with the usual weekend patrons, students hunched over laptops, couples sharing delicate pastries, and families with exuberantly energetic children. Sophie Carter arrived with unwavering punctuality at precisely 10 a.m. As punctual as I remembered, she appeared markedly different, seeming smaller and less polished than I recalled, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, clad in jeans and a cozy sweater rather than her trademark power suits. Upon spotting me, she hesitated momentarily before approaching with the cautious steps of someone navigating a treacherous minefield. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi. Can I sit?" I gestured towards the empty chair. She sat down, ordered a latte, and then folded her hands in a gesture that eerily mirrored one of my own. For what felt like an eternity, we simply gazed at each other, attempting to bridge the chasm of years that separated us. I searched for traces of the girl I had once known in this woman's face, obscured by the passage of time, the accumulation of experiences, and the indelible marks of heartache. Yet, I could still see her there, just beneath the surface. "I don't know where to start," Sophie Carter finally confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "The beginning usually works," I replied gently. She offered a faint smile, a fleeting glimpse of our shared sense of humor. "Which beginning?" There seemed to be several versions floating around, and I no longer know which one holds the truth. "The true one," I said with conviction. "That's always best." She inhaled deeply, as if gathering her courage. "I remember you as the best dad. You attended all my soccer games, helped me construct the science fair volcano that almost blew up the kitchen, taught me to ride a bike, always reminding me that it was okay to be scared, but that I had to try anyway. You made me feel capable, like I could do anything." "You were, and you are," I affirmed. "Then, seemingly overnight, you were suddenly branded a criminal. Mom told me you had been stealing from the company for years, betraying us and everyone who had placed their trust in you. She showed me bank statements, illicit transfers, all the seemingly irrefutable evidence, claiming that you had confessed to your crimes. I didn't want to believe it, but the proof was right there in front of me, your confession. Your guilty plea, your prison sentence. I remember it all so vividly. I was consumed by anger and utter confusion. How could you throw everything away for something as trivial as money? We already had money, we had success. What more could you possibly need? I came to believe that you loved money more than you loved us, more than you loved me. She paused, swallowing hard as tears welled up in her eyes. Then Mom died. And that will, that letter. Suddenly, everything I thought I knew turned out to be a lie. You hadn't stolen anything. You had sacrificed everything to protect my career, to safeguard my future. I spent 12 long years hating you for something you didn't do. You didn't know, I replied softly. Your mother ensured that you wouldn't, but I should have questioned it. I should have at least wondered if there might be another side to the story. Her voice cracked with emotion. You were my father. I should have believed in you. You were 28 years old, Sophie. Your mother was your hero, your boss, your mentor. She presented you with what appeared to be irrefutable proof that I was guilty. What else could you have reasonably believed? The truth. Tears streamed down her face now, unbidden and unrestrained. I should have believed in the truth. The truth was skillfully concealed, deliberately hidden from view. Your mother made certain of that. I hate her for lying to you, for allowing you to suffer needlessly, for building her empire upon your sacrifice and never once setting the record straight. And I hate that she's now beyond my reach, that I can't confront her and demand an explanation. She was dying when she wrote that will, with months to reconsider her choices, to change her mind, to keep her secrets buried. Yet she ultimately chose to reveal the truth. That took courage, Dad. Too little, too late, perhaps, but it's more than many people manage to muster. Sophie Carter wiped her eyes with a youthful gesture that tugged at my heartstrings. I've been trying to contest the will. Did you know that? David mentioned it. I consulted with 3 of the top lawyers in the city, and they all concurred that it's airtight. Mom ensured that too. I can't even put up a good fight. Can't even pretend that I have a chance of succeeding. I'm just done. The CEO job I worked tirelessly for 12 years to attain is gone. The substantial inheritance I had always expected is gone. The mother I thought I knew and loved never really existed. The father I hated for all these years turns out to be innocent. My entire life has been built upon a foundation of lies. She laughed, but the sound was laced with bitterness. $25. That's the sum total of my worth. $1 for every year I toiled at a company my mother built on fraud and my father's sacrifice. It's almost poetic. She wanted you to start over, to learn the value of earning your own way rather than simply inheriting a fortune. I countered gently. Maybe she also wanted to punish me for my part in her deception. Or maybe, Sophie Carter posited, her gaze piercing, maybe she wanted to save you. Sophie Carter looked at me searchingly, as if trying to decipher my true motives. What do you want, Dad? You have the money, the company, everything you could ever desire. You could destroy me completely, ensure that I never work in the tech industry again. You could expose Mom's misdeeds to the entire world, revealing my unwitting involvement in her schemes. I don't seek revenge, Sophie Carter, I stated firmly. Then what? What is it that you truly want from me? It was a perfectly valid question, one I had been grappling with myself. What times I want? For 12 long years, I had wanted nothing, training myself to need little and expect even less. Now, I suddenly had everything, and yet, I still didn't know what I truly desired. I want you to be okay, I said, the words coming from the depths of my heart. I want you to learn the lessons that your mother never did, that integrity is infinitely more valuable than fleeting success, that who you are as a person is far more important than what you own, that some prices are simply too high to pay, regardless of what you're buying. How am I supposed to do that? I'm 40 years old, Dad. I don't even know how to be anyone other than who Mom molded me into. Then learn, I urged. Start over. Discover who Sophie Carter Brennan truly is, independent of being Helen Blake's daughter, Andrew Blake's victim, or Brennan Technologies' CEO. Just Sophie Carter, just you. I don't know how, she confessed, her voice filled with uncertainty. Neither did I admitted. 12 years ago, I was a convicted felon with no job, no money, and no prospects to speak of. I had to relearn how to be human from scratch. It wasn't easy, and sometimes it didn't even seem possible. But I persevered, and I ultimately made it through. How? She pleaded. By accepting that my old life was gone, irrevocably lost, and ultimately undesirable. By finding value in the small, everyday things. Elaine Porter's heartfelt gratitude when I saved her a mere $40 on her taxes, the Patel's daughter's wedding invitation, Caleb Morgan's proud graduation photo. Small, honest, real things. Sophie Carter began to cry openly, her shoulders shaking with the force of her emotion. I don't know if I can do that, Dad. You can, Sophie. You're far stronger than you give yourself credit for. Really, I'm not, she insisted. You came here today, I pointed out gently. That took immense strength. She smiled weakly through her tears. Or perhaps it was merely desperation. Sometimes they're one and the same. We sat in silence for a while, watching the people passing by outside, a young couple holding hands, an elderly man defying the posted signs to feed the pigeons, a child chasing after a runaway balloon. What will you do with the company? Sophie Carter eventually asked, breaking the silence. Keep it running, I replied without hesitation. I will make sure that it's run ethically, and I will try to make it a company that's actually worth inheriting. And then give it back to you, I said. Maybe. Maybe if you earn it. If you become the kind of person who could run it with integrity rather than unchecked ambition. She nodded slowly, absorbing my words. That's fair. Your mother left you $25. I said, but I'm offering you a job. An entry-level administrative assistant position in the ethics compliance department. Minimum wage, no special treatment, and absolutely no fast track to management. Just honest work. Sophie Carter's eyes widened in surprise. You're offering me a job? If you want it, if you're willing to start at the very bottom and earn your way up, if you can handle taking orders from people who used to be your subordinates, if you can value the work itself more than the title that goes with it. That's humiliating, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Yes, I replied. Everyone will know who I am, and everyone will laugh at me. Probably, I conceded. Why would you do that to me, Dad? I'm not doing it times to times you, Sophie. I'm offering you a chance to do it times for times yourself. Your mother's will took away the life that you had always expected to lead. This is an opportunity for you to build a better one, but only if you truly want it. I won't force you, and I won't pressure you. The offer is open-ended. Take it or leave it. She looked down at her latte, watching the foam swirling in intricate patterns. I need to think about it. Take your time, I said softly. She stood up, grabbing her coat and purse, and then paused. Dad, yes, I'm sorry for not believing in you, for all the lost years, for everything. I stood as well, facing her squarely. And I'm sorry for the burden you had to carry, for all the lies you were told, for not being there to help you become the person you were always meant to be. Can we? She hesitated, searching for the right words. Can we try again? Not pick up where we left off, because that's impossible, but start fresh, learn who we are now, and try to build something new. I considered whether forgiveness was truly possible, whether trust could ever be fully rebuilt, whether 12 years of painful silence could be bridged by mere intention and effort. We can try, I said finally. She smiled genuinely, a small but undeniably real smile. That's enough, Dad. Trying is enough. She turned and left, disappearing into the bustling crowd of cafe patrons. I sat back down, finished my coffee, and watched the city come to life. Toronto, the place I had fled in shame, afraid to face the consequences of my actions, the place I had eventually returned to, only to find that loss had been transformed into something unexpected. I thought about Margaret's letter, tucked safely in my wallet, her heartfelt confession and her belated penance, and her hope that I would somehow use her ill-gotten wealth more wisely than she ever had. I thought about the company she had built on fraud and sacrifice, now mine to reshape or to destroy as I saw fit. I thought about Sophie Carter walking the city streets, trying to discover who she truly was now that everything she had always believed had turned out to be false. I thought about my job offer, and the opportunity it represented for her to become someone new, someone better, And I thought about myself, Andrew Blake, 63 years old, former CFO, convicted felon, tax preparer, and now, ridiculously, the owner of a $185 million empire. What would I do with it all? The answer came slowly, but with unwavering clarity. I would do exactly what Margaret had asked of me: keep the company running, ensure that it was run ethically, and make it a company that was truly worth inheriting. But I would also do much more. I would use the money to create second chances for others, establishing scholarships for ex-offenders, job training programs for those re-entering society, comprehensive rehabilitation programs, and access to affordable legal aid for those who couldn't afford proper representation, all the things I had desperately wished had existed 12 years ago, when I walked out of prison with nothing but a tarnished record and a deep sense of despair. I would transform Brennan Technologies into a proving ground for Sophie Carter. Not a handout, but a genuine opportunity for her to learn to lead with integrity instead of ambition. A place for her to earn what had been taken from her. And I would keep my humble Vancouver apartment, my simple life, my small accounting practice, because those things were real in a way that wealth never could be earned, chosen, lived, mine in a way that inherited money never would be. The check for Sophie Carter's first paycheck would be worth far more than any inheritance, the first dollar she had ever truly earned, free from her mother's shadow and her father's sacrifice. Maybe she would understand that, and maybe she wouldn't. Maybe she would reject the job offer, the opportunity to start over, the chance to build a new life. It would hurt, but it would ultimately be her choice, her life, her mistakes, her path. I couldn't save her any more than Margaret could have saved me from my own choices, or I could have saved Margaret from hers. We all have to walk our own roads, make our own decisions, and live with the consequences that inevitably follow. But I could offer her a map, a starting point, a first step in the right direction. The rest would be up to her. I stood up, left money on the table for the coffee and a generous tip, and walked out into the crisp autumn sunshine. The air was cold but clean, carrying the scent of car exhaust, roasting chestnuts, and the promise of new beginnings. But first, there was one more stop I needed to make. Mount Pleasant Cemetery was quiet, save for the gentle rustling of the wind through the trees, the distant hum of traffic, and the soft crunch of my own footsteps on the gravel path. I found Margaret's grave without difficulty: freshly turned earth, brightly colored flowers, and a simple granite headstone engraved with her name and the inscription, "She built empires, but forgot to build herself." I stood there for a long time, my hands thrust deep into my pockets, my thoughts swirling with so many accusations, regrets, and what-ifs that they seemed to shrink into insignificance. "I'll take care of the company," I said, my voice barely audible above the wind. "And I'll take care of Sophie Carter if she'll let me. That's all I can promise." The wind rustled through the branches of the trees, carrying with it the scent of fallen leaves and the distant promise of rain. I waited there, as if expecting Margaret to answer me from beyond the grave, as if the universe might somehow give me a sign. But there was only silence, and perhaps that was the only answer I needed. I turned and walked back towards the cemetery gates, towards the waiting taxi, towards the airport, and towards Vancouver, where my life was waiting for me, small and honest and real. Behind me, Margaret's grave stood bathed in the warm afternoon sun, holding its secrets, its truths, and a legacy that I would spend the rest of my days trying to redeem, not for her, not for Sophie Carter, but for myself. Because in the end, what truly mattered wasn't what you owned, what you lost, or who wronged you along the way, but who you chose to be when all the lies had fallen away and you stood alone with your conscience and the unyielding choice of what to do next. I chose integrity, second chances, and the unwavering belief that people could change, that Sophie Carter could become someone Margaret had never been, that I could use wealth to create good in the world, and that perhaps, just perhaps, I could finally make things right. Maybe I was naive, foolish, softened by 12 years of living a simple life, unable to fully comprehend the cutthroat nature of the world I was about to re-enter. But I had spent those years learning to be human, finding value in simplicity, meaning in honesty, and peace in letting go of the corrosive power of anger. I wasn't about to forget those lessons now. The taxi driver asked me for my destination. I gave him the airport address and watched as the Toronto skyline began to recede in the distance, the towering glass skyscrapers, the relentless flow of traffic, the bustling streets teeming with life. My phone buzzed, breaking through my reverie. A text message from Sophie Carter. I've been thinking about that job offer. Can I have the weekend to decide? I replied without hesitation. Take your time, Sophie. The offer doesn't expire. 3 dots appeared on the screen, indicating that she was typing a response. They disappeared, and then reappeared a moment later. Finally, the message arrived. Thank you for everything, the sacrifice, the chance, for being willing to try. I don't deserve any of it. None of us truly deserve anything, I replied. We just get what we get and try to do something worthwhile with it. The 3 dots appeared one more time, and then disappeared. Then I'll call you Monday, Dad, you'll answer. I put my phone away and gazed out the window as the suburbs of Toronto gradually gave way to rolling farmland, and then to the sprawling industrial landscape surrounding the airport. Soon, I would be back in Vancouver, back in my cozy apartment with its ever-present rain and its creaking radiator, back to dealing with Elaine Porter's taxes, the Patel's business questions, and Caleb Morgan's concerns about his car loan, back to my real life. But now, that life came with the added responsibility of a $185 million empire, a company to reshape, and a daughter to help rebuild. It wasn't the ending I had ever expected when Laura Bennett had called me 12 years ago. And it certainly wasn't the ending I would have chosen for myself, but it was mine. The plane took off into a breathtaking sunset sky, carrying me west toward home and forward toward whatever the future held. Below, Toronto shrank into the distance, just another city on the map, holding its secrets in the lives of millions of people trying to figure out who they were and whether redemption was truly possible. I hoped it was, for Sophie Carter's sake, for my own, and for all the others who carried the weight of their past mistakes. The story isn't truly finished until you stop trying, until you give up hope, until you allow your mistakes to define you rather than refine you. Margaret's story had come to an end, but mine was still being written, and so was Sophie Carter's, and so was everyone else's who still had breath in their lungs, a choice to make, and the courage to keep moving forward. That was the real inheritance that Margaret had left us, the reminder that it's never too late to tell the truth, to make amends for past wrongs, or to become the person you were always meant to be, even if it takes dying to find the courage, losing everything to truly understand what matters, or 12 long years and $185 million to finally make things right. The plane climbed higher, chasing the setting sun towards the mountains and the vast expanse of the ocean, and towards the apartment where my life was waiting for me to reconcile who I had been, who I had become, and who I would now have to be. It wouldn't be easy, but then again, the most worthwhile things in life never are. A text from Sophie Carter. I've been thinking about that job offer. Can I have the weekend to decide? I replied, take your time. The offer doesn't expire. 3 dots appeared, they disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, thank you for everything, the sacrifice, the chance, for being willing to try. I don't deserve any of it. None of us deserve anything, I replied. We just get what we get and try to do something worthwhile with it. The dots appeared one more time. Then I'll call you Monday. You'll answer. I put my phone away and watched the suburbs give way to farmland, then the sprawl around the airport. Soon, I'd be in Vancouver, in my apartment, with the rain and creaking radiator, back to Elaine Porter's taxes, the Patel's business questions, and Caleb Morgan's car loan concerns. Back to my real life. But now that life came with a $185 million responsibility, a company to reshape, and a daughter to help rebuild. It wasn't the ending I expected when Laura Bennett called, and it wasn't the ending I'd have chosen, but it was mine. The plane took off into a sunset sky, carrying me west toward home and forward toward whatever came next. Below, Toronto shrank, just another city, holding its secrets and the lives of millions trying to figure out who they were and whether redemption was possible. I hoped it was for Sophie Carter's sake, for mine, for all carrying the weight of our mistakes. The story isn't finished until you stop trying, until you give up, until you let mistakes define you instead of refine you. Margaret's story was finished, but mine was still being written, and Sophie Carter's, and everyone's who still had breath and choice and courage. That was the real inheritance. Margaret left the reminder that it's never too late to tell the truth, make amends, or become who you should have been, even if it takes dying to find the courage, losing everything to understand what matters, or 12 years and $185 million to finally make things right. The plane climbed, chasing the sun toward the mountains and ocean and the apartment where my life waited for me to reconcile who I'd been, who I'd become, and who I'd now have to be. It wouldn't be easy, but then again, worthwhile things never are.